Today we're going to be talking about understanding the distinctions between whey and plant proteins. And the reason I chose this topic is that now is coming out with various additional plant protein products, including some certified organic ones. And there seems to be some lack of information about how they stack up to the traditional proteins that people have used before. So I wanted to address some of those in a generic way rather than a product-specific way today. And why is protein so important? It's a macronutrient that provides amino acids, and they're components of many, many different chemical compounds in the body, from neurotransmitters and enzymes to muscles and connective tissues and our organs. So this is an important part of our nutrition. Anytime you talk about diet, protein becomes an important issue. A lot of times if people are on restricted diets, protein becomes an even more important problem, because if you're not eating meat, for example, or if you're on restricted diets where you're not eating certain kinds of foods that are traditional protein sources, milk and eggs and meats would be common ones. Legumes would be the next most common one, and sometimes people just don't eat a lot of these or don't eat them regularly at every meal. And then it becomes an issue of trying to supplement proteins and which ones work. Why would you choose one over another? So New Hope, a marketing organization in the natural products industry that does a lot of information and news stories, etc., they talk about where we get our protein and actually surveyed and looked at the markets both globally and in the United States. And about a third of the protein market worldwide is sports proteins in the United States. And if you count U.S. whey protein alone, that's a significant part of that, over $1 billion a year in sales. So whey protein is the big category for proteins in general, both globally and in the United States. Casein, another milk protein, is still another dominant protein. Sometimes you'll see milk protein concentrates. We'll talk about that as well. But following that is soy protein, which has had a lot of actually misinformation on the internet that scares people away from taking it, although it's still a fairly common protein. And egg protein, and then the vegetable proteins like rice and pea. And we're starting to see that beef and chicken protein, especially in the form of bone broth products, starting to grow in sales and in interest. So you've got your meat proteins, your plant proteins, and your milk and egg proteins are major categories in the protein segment. Now, why does plant protein become so important? Because the milk and egg protein, which meet demand today in terms of worldwide supply, are expected to have an increased gap over the next generation or two, where probably just a little more than half of the protein will be coming from milk and eggs, from meat and eggs. By the time we talk about 2054, which is quite a bit down the road, but we're looking at a growing worldwide population, and the ability of growing meat and eggs and to some extent milk is going to be hindered by various factors. And this is a reason why farmers want to use antibiotics as a growth aid. They want to use growth hormones to try to boost the amount of protein. They want to feed them corn and soybeans instead of grazing to try to get them mature faster and get higher yields. This is going to be a problem for people who want natural products, and it's mitigated if they can take plant proteins. But of course, there's been some reluctance to rely on plant proteins, thinking of it's not complete protein, it's not going to provide what I need, and those kind of concerns, which I will address today. So when you're looking at powdered protein products, milk proteins are the dominant force here. And milk is made out of two primary proteins, casein and whey. And the milk, if you have liquid milk, it's about 80% casein, which is the type of protein that gets trapped in the cheese when you make cheese, and about 20% whey protein, which is the liquid that is not coagulated to form cheese and which tends to be processed as a whey protein. Liquid whey is about half and half protein and lactose, milk sugar. And so there's various strategies to process that and remove as much as possible of the lactose and concentrate the protein. Microfiltration followed by drying and commonly instantizing with lecithin, which is non-GMO and traditionally from soy, but more commonly today you see more and more products with sunflower lecithin instead of soy because of a fear of soy. But this whey protein is a byproduct of cheese making process. It is considered to have a complete amino acid profile, and part of that is a natural source of branched chain amino acids. The three amino acids that are three of the 9 essential amino acids, which are very important in terms of having complete protein. Whey protein is considered quickly digested and assimilated and is distinct, of course, from the casein, which would be left in the cheese, though casein protein products are available. And I kind of mentioned all this, except let me emphasize that lactose content is extremely low in whey protein, and whey protein concentrate, sometimes people with lactose intolerance can have reactions to whey protein concentrates, which have lower amounts of protein and more lactose than whey protein isolates. Whey protein isolates, I have never known anyone in my 30-plus year career selling whey protein who has reacted to whey protein isolate because of a lactose intolerance. There's so little lactose in there, people do not tend to react to it. Whey protein is a mixture of beta-lactoglobulin, alpha-lactalbumin, bovine serum albumin, and various immunoglobulins. And this is one of the reasons why it is very popular, because it's kind of like a dilute colostrum product as well as being a protein. And besides the whey protein concentrate I mentioned earlier and the whey protein isolate, whey protein hydrolysate is another form where they use heat or enzymes to pre-digest and make the protein more digestible. So the concentrate has low levels of fat and carbs. The carbohydrate is mostly lactose, though of course sometimes people who are very sensitive to lactose can be intolerant to whey protein concentrate. And you'll have up to 90% protein. It's usually between 80 and 90% protein in terms of the powder. Whey protein isolate has the lowest levels of both fat and carbohydrates, lactose again being the primary carb. It's up to 95% protein, usually between 90 and 95%, and it's microfiltered to remove more of the lactose, which is a physical process. Whey protein hydrolysate, it is something that's done to improve digestibility. Concentrate or isolate can be hydrolyzed, can be pre-digested. And this is most commonly found in medical foods or infant formulas. Now, when we're comparing whey protein versus casein, we're seeing significant better gains in strength, lean body mass, and decrease in fat mass compared to casein when they're used comparably. This is a whey isolate, although it is a hydrolyzed form that's easier to digest. The proteins, the amino acids in there would be similar to what you'd get from taking regular whey protein. And the effect on lean mass and fat mass is shown here on the graph in the study. This is 10 weeks of resistance training and supplementation. Even the performance on squats, bench press, and pull downs are significantly improved on the whey protein group versus the casein group. So we're seeing improvements relative to body weight. So we know there's differences on the milk proteins, but people are taking the plant proteins and they want to know if these are going to work as well. So some recent studies have looked at that. Can consumption of rice protein isolate improve recovery and changes in body composition compared to whey protein in larger doses and adequate doses? And there was no difference between the group if you give enough of the rice protein. And that's a key, and I'll explore that a little bit more in some of the following slides. The amount matters. So when we're looking at the essential amino acid profile of complete protein, and we're comparing whey protein and rice protein, we're looking at complete protein. You get plenty of tryptophan, for example, the top one, in either source. You get plenty of threonine, the next one. You get plenty of isoleucine and leucine. Lysine is a little low in the rice protein. Lysine is typically going to be lower in grains and higher in beans, which is one of the reasons why food combining for protein has been known for probably 50 years or more. Combining beans and grains to get complete protein, because then you're raising the lysine levels. Your methionine and cysteine levels are fine in either source. Your phenylalanine and tyrosine are fine. Your valine is fine, and your histidine is fine. So it's really the lysine that's the limiting factor if you're doing rice protein versus whey protein. But by doing more of the rice protein, you can get enough to compensate and have enough complete protein. And when we're looking at the change in lean body mass, body fat, biceps muscle thickness, and quadriceps muscle thickness, and looking at an 8-week effect of supplementation, we're seeing that there's no significant difference between the rice protein supplementation and the whey protein. Now, soy protein is the traditional vegetable protein, and there's long been a myth, and I'm going to call it straight out as a myth, that soy protein should not be used by bodybuilders, should not be used by men, should not even be used by people who have had breast cancer, well, women or men. And this is simply not supported by the scientific literature. Short-term supplementation with soy and whey protein combination does not lead to proestrogenic or anti-anabolic effects in bodybuilders. This has been done again and again. This is not a single study. I'm showing one study here that's fairly recent, but this is not something that bodybuilders should be concerned about. And I'll talk about that a little more when I talk about protein stacking, which is another concept that I want to make familiar to you. Pea protein, which is either non-GMO version or organic, which is non-GMO and pesticide-free, so they're both non-GMO versions. All pea protein is non-GMO. There are not GMO versions of them. They are non-reactive for most people in terms of allergens. They should be screened for microbiological, heavy metal, and other potential environmental contaminants. And they should be screened for adulterants, which are deliberately added to things, such as melamine, a plastic, or steroid adulterants, which are pharmaceuticals, which do not belong in these products. And companies should be screening for these. Our company does. And this is a basic competence, knowing the purity and quality of your ingredients. Now, I mentioned the branched chain amino acid, the BCAAs, before, and there's one in particular called L-Leucine. And to maximize the skeletal muscle protein synthesis, it takes 2 to 3 grams of leucine, or about 0.05 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, a typical adult is 150 pounds, which is about 70 kilograms. So 70 times 0.05 would be the amount of leucine needed, but that equals about 2 to 3 grams a day in humans. Once that reaches this threshold, and you're getting 2 to 3 grams a day, that's all you need for maximum protein synthesis, assuming you're getting other proteins. Now, one way they tested that is they looked at the difference of consuming 40 grams of egg protein, which has 10% of its protein as leucine, and 20 grams of egg protein, where there was only 2 grams of leucine, and there was no difference in skeletal muscle protein synthesis. 2 grams and 4 grams, which is a difference between taking half as much or twice as much of the egg protein, did not make a difference in how much skeletal muscle was being formed. So the problem with the plant proteins are at low doses of protein. At lower doses of protein, they don't provide enough leucine or other amino acids like lysine, as I showed in the rice example, to give you complete protein. But if you give more protein, and it's about 30% of your daily calories, then both plant and animal proteins are sufficient and give you complete protein. There are no differences on whey or rice protein if you're giving it at 30% of your daily calories instead of at 10%, say a low protein intake. Now, I mentioned a minute or two ago the concept of protein stacking, and there have been several studies I've seen where they combine milk proteins, casein and whey protein with soy protein. And the reason they do that is you get an anabolic response in less than an hour for whey protein, but the soy protein lasts longer, and the casein lasts even longer because it takes longer to digest. You get actually up to 5 hours of stimulated protein synthesis. Eating protein stimulates protein synthesis in muscles. So prolonging that anabolic effect is done by stacking proteins, by eating a variety of proteins. Whey protein is digested very quickly. Hydrolyzed whey protein or hydrolyzed casein, which also exists, would be very quick because they're pre-digested. Adding to whey protein, soy protein, or pea protein as a medium length digested protein, and casein, another milk protein, as a slowly digested protein prolongs the effect. And the combination works well, and it actually will prolong the effects on various muscle synthesis and preventing muscle breakdown. They're prolonging the protein muscle anabolism, which is the muscle synthesis, by blending proteins instead of doing a single protein like whey protein. So even if you're doing whey protein, adding a plant protein to it is going to prolong it. Adding a casein to it is going to prolong the effect. Your effects on satiety, on muscle building will be improved by having a combination. And it is important, as I mentioned earlier, to have adulterant testing. Now developed the innovative adulterant testing method published in a peer-reviewed journal. It has been confirmed in 2 additional published clinical trials, which call our method the fundamental method of identifying pharmaceutical adulterants in raw materials. So we can look for steroid compounds, including androstenedione. We can look for weight loss drugs. We can look for erectile dysfunction drugs, such as Viagra analogs. And we can look for melamine, which is something that's sometimes added to proteins to boost the apparent protein value, but it's really boosting nitrogen and not really protein. Our sports line, including our protein powders, have won a number of awards, so that's another consideration, having a reputable brand. And our proteins are clean, tested, pure, and proven. And looking at the plant protein products in particular, We're making sure they're tested for micro and heavy metals, for protein content, for pharmaceutical adulterants plus melamine, and making sure that people are going to get the cleanest possible product. And we don't use artificial colors, flavors, or sweeteners, which make it a heck of a lot easier to mask sometimes unpleasant flavors in some of these products. And we know our customers want a natural, pure product. We don't do that. We use only natural ingredients. And we normally offer unflavored, unsweetened, even pure versions of our proteins, including whey protein, including plant proteins, including pea protein, for example. If we offer an unflavored, unsweetened version, it's more versatile. And if you have certain issues, you don't want a certain sweetener for blood sugar issues, or you don't like the taste, or whatever reason, for allergenic reasons, you have a more hypoallergenic product, you can jazz it up and flavor and sweeten it any way you like in a blender or in a shaker. But we like to give you those options. Yes, we'll offer some flavored and sweetened versions that are naturally flavored and sweetened, and naturally colored, of course. But we'll also offer the plain, unflavored, unsweetened version, just so you can have the choice you need.